This program was first broadcast on Canterbury's access media station, Plains FM, and was made with the assistance of New Zealand On Air.
Welcome to Emergence News. This program comes to you from the Plains FM recording studios in Christchurch, Aotearoa, New Zealand. The program is produced and presented by a team of Share International volunteers who bring news of the emergence of the next world teacher, Maitreya, and discuss some of his teachings. And that's what we're going to do today. Today we're going to take a look at some of the core teachings which, if implemented by humanity, create greater levels of self-awareness, harmlessness, and therefore a greater understanding of karma, or the law of cause and effect. And all of these qualities will bring about better human relations, justice, and peace. So let's take a look at what we're going to do today. We're going to investigate honesty of mind, sincerity of spirit, and detachment. And joining me in the studio today is Peter. And Peter, how are you going to look at this? What perspective are you going to take on the subject?
Well, Nigel, I'm just thinking the sincerity of spirit was one that I always sort of thought, well, what exactly do we mean by that? And so I've gone into depth with that a wee bit and just taking Maitreya's comments, and it enlightens what he actually does mean.
I'm pleased about that because I was reading Honesty of Mind and Sincerity of Spirit by Benjamin Creme, and I have to admit I read it twice and I still need to do some more study. There's a lot in there. And of course we've talked on the program a lot in the past about detachment.
That's right. Yeah.
And I'm going to be looking at the perspectives from Maitreya, Benjamin Creme, and if we've got time, even Sai Baba talks on the subject of detachment. So back in a moment with Peter, and if you are familiar with the ancient wisdom teachings, then the need to develop and employ detachment will be a quality that you might already be reading, aspiring towards, or at least studying. And we'll join Peter on that subject next.
Right, well, we can understand honesty of mind probably because it basically says don't tell lies. Sincerity of spirit is a wee bit different. We know sincerity, but what do we mean by spirit? Maitreya says that spirit is the energy. Your spirit becomes exhausted if you're doing the things that are not perhaps the right thing. You know, you can become very exhausted very quickly. You need the water of detachment. So you can see how he brings that detachment in his teachings all the time. He says you can control knowledge and wisdom. You can use it positively, but it should not take charge of yourself. It should not master you. The moment you are detached from it, you master it. So is that clear? We need to master the energy. We need to be detached from it, from the aspects of our own physical activities.
So when you say physical activities, you're talking about the mind, physical body.
That's right, and
astral.
our work and our relationships and all that makes us human, I think, really, Nigel. So spirit is like the chi of the Chinese. The Chinese often talk about that, and I don't know. Have you ever done Tai Chi, Nigel?
No, my mother has been talking about giving it a go for years.
All right. Yeah.
Yes, but no, I haven't done it. I haven't tried it myself, but I've seen people doing it in very public spaces, and it looks lovely.
Yes, well, in fact, they do it a lot in China, and we had a Chinese instructor there for a while, and he was from the Chinese military, actually, and he was very, very good at it and very graceful with it. And he talks about building up the chi, which is the same thing as spirit. And I thought, well, this is a good way of actually realising what it is, because I've seen the Tai Chi experts and they can create a force field of chi around them. And several people attacking them can't get through this force field.
Through the energy.
Yes, it's an energy that we can't see, but we know it's there, don't we? And the sense of well-being, of course, allows the spirit to flow through us. We are born with a sense of goodwill. All children are born with it. It is human nature. It is spirit in action. But it can be stamped out quite early in the child if the child is ill-treated. A child can be warped psychologically and their innate goodwill transformed into an undying hatred, which brings about the violence that is being expressed around the world. Keep the goodwill of children intact by not implanting your idea of what that person is or should be, thus stamping out their spontaneity, their spirit. We often say, that's a spirited child, don't we? It's a common term, and we realise what it is. It's the energy that child puts out. It's indefinable in many ways.
And it hasn't yet been suppressed.
No, that's right. And so the originality is part of that, their own very special free will. Unfortunately, as Benjamin Creme says, everyone infringes the free will of everyone else. Only the masters do not infringe free will. Infringement of free will very quickly leads to the end of goodwill. When doing a task with goodwill, you feel the energy of the spirit flowing through you, and the hours fly by and nothing is a problem. I'm sure we've all been in situations like that with something that we really enjoy doing and helping other people and that sort of thing. And of course, this leads to harmlessness, which is the nature of the soul. This also requires detachment. So we see these attributes lead to a fulfilling life with low levels of conflict. And you were talking about the karma before too, Nigel. You know, this is what this harmlessness, of course, is about reducing the bad karma, if you like. And so it needs to be worked on to actually accumulate this harmlessness, which is perhaps fairly difficult for us to do because we're used to having our say, we're used to having our opinion, we're used to interfering in other people's activities, aren't we?
Yes, in a lot of areas of life, such as economics and politics, that's encouraged. Yeah. But we need to understand the need for harmlessness. And when we have a better understanding of karma, a better understanding of the law behind that,
yes,
then we will have a greater appreciation of the need for harmlessness.
This is right. And this is exactly what Maitreya is here to do, of course, is to set us on the right path, as it were. So let the Spirit flow through us as we put ourselves aside and work for the loving goodwill of all humanity, creating as we go the harmlessness that frees us from negative karma and speeds us on the path of initiation and then on to the mastership of our planet's lessons.
Thank you for that, Peter. Honesty of mind and sincerity of spirit. And if you want to read more on those subjects, I recommend Maitreya's Mission Volume 2. It was published back in 1993, wasn't it, Peter?
And it's a fair while ago now, isn't it?
It is a fair while ago now. And if the subject interests you, I highly recommend that book. It's Volume 2, Maitreya's Mission, published back in 1993. And if you go online and visit the shareinternational.com website, you can order books by Benjamin Creme from there. So to fulfill my brief, I'm going to be looking at honesty of mind, sincerity of spirit, but particularly I'll be focused on detachment. I'm going to get Benjamin Creme's perspective on this. But I can't help but think that there have been some very important stories that have been told to us, humanity, leading towards this subject. Presented to humanity over important stories that have been presented to humanity over a sustained period of time. And we've often talked about one of the examples of this, and that was Helena Blavatsky. Born in the Ukraine back in 1831, she became interested in spirituality, visited Asia, Europe, India, and Tibet, and studied under Hindu gurus. She met Colonel Henry Olcott in 1875 and founded the Theosophical Society. And Theosophy presented a significant story to the world, especially to the West. Ideas and concepts such as intuition, meditation, and raising human consciousness. And that's really what this subject's about today, is helping us all raise human consciousness through developing honesty of mind, sincerity of spirit, and detachment. And other teachers over this period of time have included Sai Baba, Krishnamurti, Alice Bailey, Helena Roerich, and Benjamin Creme. They have all had a story to tell, not so much about themselves, but about the next stage of development here on planet Earth. And all those stories point towards the arrival of the next world teacher for the next 2,500 years. So back to my brief, Benjamin Creme and his view that Maitreya's teachings on honesty, sincerity and detachment are at the very root of the transformational process of self-awareness, which then becomes self-realization. Creme says the world is going to be changed, above all, by countless millions of people, men and women everywhere, of goodwill. And you spoke of that just a few moments ago, Peter. Men and women everywhere of goodwill. And it is precisely these people of goodwill who will respond to Maitreya, to his teachings, to his message. So how does this transformation continue to develop and grow? Creme says that when people become more attuned to their own being, their own self, their own soul, they will inevitably become more harmless. Why? Because the nature of the soul is harmlessness. So when Maitreya speaks and shows the need for harmlessness in all human relations, you can see how quickly that could catch on and excite the imagination of more and more people. They will clearly see the need for harmlessness. And when they really understand the law of cause and effect, which most people understand only vaguely, they will see the need for harmlessness. They will know that every thought, every action has an effect, and that effect actually makes their lives. That there is no such thing as good or bad luck, but the outer result of previous actions. So it's not only what we did way back in our youth or in a past lifetime that needs to be considered, it is our actions right now, moment to moment, that is important, that determines the life which is spreading out ahead of us, which we are creating moment to moment. So the need for detachment, which inevitably leads to harmlessness. And that is why Maitreya puts detachment at the very heart of the transformational process for humanity, the transformational process of self-awareness. Harmlessness proceeds stage by stage as detachment proceeds through the evolutionary process we call detachment. And that is what the evolution of consciousness is all about. As we detach ourselves from the results of physical, emotional, and mental experience, the soul can then express its harmless nature through the personality, through the ego. So the more detached, the more harmless. The less detached, the more harmful. Attachment is an overdeveloped sense of the separate personality, the ego. So we must learn how to detach from identifying with our physical vehicles. And as we just said a moment ago, it's more easily said than done.
Yeah, so
it's a real challenge for us. And this will be central to Maitreya's teaching about the nature of life, and relate that to the great law of cause and effect. And this law determines the results of our actions. What we think, what we do, sets in motion causes. The effects stemming from those causes make our lives. So hopefully we can then see the need for harmlessness. When we can see the need, then gradually we can change. And I came across a couple of definitions. They're Benjamin Creme definitions, Peter, of honesty of mind. He says all of us think one thing, say something else, and then do something else again. That is dishonesty of mind. Honesty of mind is thinking something and saying and doing what is consistent with that thought. And sincerity of spirit, which Peter covered earlier, is really when you are speaking from the heart, totally sincere, consonant with who you are and what you are, without any pretensions or glamours, and without building yourself up as something that you are not. So we need to work towards being as direct and pure and true to ourselves, and that's sincerity of spirit. When I was doing my preparations for this program, I came across an interesting question, Peter, that was put to Benjamin Creme back in 1994. And back then, he was asked, is forgiveness a part of Maitreya's teachings? And his answer was yes. The basis of his teaching is the cultivation of detachment. Forgiveness becomes possible only through a growing detachment and correct identification.
You should often hear people talking about, they've had something traumatic in their life, and then they say that, they've forgiven them or they can't forgive them, one or the other.
Yes.
And, it must be a very difficult process to forgive someone, particularly if it's been a really traumatic thing. But, it is only, as you say, by detachment, by standing back from it and looking at it dispassionately, that you're capable of then
exercising forgiveness.
Yes,
we saw a very good example of that with the Christchurch terrorist shootings at the Christchurch Mosque, and that incredible Muslim man who lost his wife in that terrible time and was able to eventually forgive the shooter. And I thought there was a marvellous example of detachment.
Yeah, indeed.
And just to finish on detachment, I thought I'd just cover very quickly Sai Baba's view on detachment. I thought it was very interesting. He says there are two types of detachment. The first one is detaching yourself from the lower for the higher, exactly what we were just talking about. Detaching yourself from that which holds you to the lower aspect of yourself. In this, there is detachment from your emotions, which is part of the getting out of Leo and into Aquarius. And that's a whole subject we could spend several programs on. And then there is the detachment from the result of the work which you do in service. Now, the second part, or the second type of detachment, is a detachment from life, which is not the same thing. Many people also detach themselves from the impact on themselves of their own emotions, their own disturbing astral nature. And some people therefore go into monasteries or convents, perhaps to retreat to a more remote location, surrounding themselves with people who will never evoke those destructive or disturbing emotional responses. This is a self-protective device, but according to Benjamin Creme, in no way brings about the detachment which can be arrived through the hurly-burly and interaction of life, which that's our challenge living in the West, isn't it?
That's right. Yes, you can see that, can't you? People virtually hiding from them. themselves.
Yes, because they know there is a destructive element there that needs to be dealt with.
That's right.
Yeah.
You can suggest there would even be hatred there or something locked up in those emotions.
Yeah. So it's a big subject, detachment. And as I said earlier, if you want to read more on this fascinating subject, Maitreya's Mission Volume 2, and to order a copy of that edition, you can visit shareinternational.com. All right, so now we're going to dip into another one of the volumes from Maitreya's Mission series, Volume 3. Peter, you've got a couple of questions there that were put to Benjamin Creme.
Yes, indeed. I always find them very interesting because obviously they're things that we can all relate to and could well have been asking ourselves. So anyway, this person asks, how does one approach being harmless in one's relationships? How does that relate to detachment? And Benjamin Creme says it relates completely to detachment. Harmlessness proceeds stage by stage as detachment proceeds through the evolutionary process. We develop detachment. That is what evolution of consciousness is about. As we detach from the results of the physical, emotional, and mental experience, the soul can express its harmless nature through the personality. The more detached, the more harmless. The less detached, the more harmful. Inevitably, attachment is an overdeveloped sense of the separate personality, the ego. The more you detach yourself from the experiences of the personality, which is really the experiences of the soul in incarnation, and detach from identifying with the vehicles, and more identify with the soul and its purpose, the more harmless you become. It is the soul in form which incarnates. It is the soul expression which produces harmlessness. Personalities can be taught, and one of the powerful means will be Maitreya's teaching about the nature of the self in relation to its vehicles, physical, astral, and mental, and the need for detachment from identifying with these vehicles. In other words, we have these vehicles, we know we've got them, but we don't need to attach ourselves. It's not us. It's an aspect of our self, of our journey that we're taking on, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the lower self.
Yes.
And what Creme here is saying is there is a higher self, which is the soul.
Yes, exactly. That's who we are. And the need for detachment from identifying with these vehicles, this will be central to Maitreya's teachings about the nature of life. The nature of life is the nature of the self. And he's talking about the soul here. As far as we are concerned, the need for harmlessness will become more and more clear, even on the personality level. Relate that to a growing understanding of the great law of cause and effect. This law determines the results of all our actions. What we think, what we do, sets in motion causes. The effects stemming from those causes makes our lives. That will be harmful or harmless, depending on the nature of the causes which we set in motion. So we can see the need for harmlessness. Harmlessness can be inculcated when we know that it is necessary. Maitreya will set in motion a schooling of humanity in the need for harmlessness on a day-to-day way. It does not mean that everyone will be harmless by the next day, but he will set in motion in people's consciousness. When we see the need, then, gradually we can change. So it's going to be a long process, isn't it? It's not sort of going to happen overnight, but
we've got to work at it.
Yes, at least it'll be a goal. The problem is not so much detaching from specific addictions, one by one, as cultivating a general attitude of detachment. If a person is truly detached, the problems of fighting the desire does not arise. The attachment of fighting creates conflict and increases the problem. This is so true because I notice a lot of things that we do we must fight this together. You know, it's the wrong word. It's the wrong attitude, isn't it? And this is what he's saying. The attitude of fighting creates conflict and increases the problem.
Exacerbates it.
Detachment is the result of withdrawing attention, and therefore energy, from the effort of overcoming the addiction. The aim is to find out who is attached. Self-awareness is the result of a growing detachment rather than the other way round.
All this information can be found on the Share International website, www.share-international.org, and also don't forget the podcasts, which are available on the Plains FM website.
We welcome your comments, questions and feedback. Please contact us at emergencenews@gmail.com.